Hi everybody and welcome back on my modeling channel. So today we're gonna do a new kit. It's gonna be a resin kit, a Boeing 717 from Contrails. So let's open the box and see what we have inside. So initially we're gonna get the instruction sheet, and as you can see it's pretty basic, but nothing too hard to handle after what you could see from my modeling experience, and a little bit of a description how the aircraft is going to look like. So now we're gonna get into the kit itself. So the fuselage is in one part. It's pretty basic. The shapes, there might be a little bit of correction on the shapes, as I don't know if you can see from here, but it's a little bit bended. It's not really a really beautiful cylinder, but you know, we're gonna be able to make it happen. The tail cone should be also an extra part. So the wing, so the wings is in one part. I have to say that they are really thick. It's not what I was expecting, but we're gonna work on that. The right wing seems to be a little bit bended down, but we're gonna work on this and try to get a better result. So the engines are mounted, two engines mounted at the rear of the aircraft. They already have the fans, but as maybe you can see here, yeah, the fans are quite bended, so unless I can't rectify it with super glue and a little bit of time, I'm gonna have to use some plastic cards to do some new ones. The other one is in a different color plastic, but seems to be okay. Now the horizontal stabilizer, it's extremely thin, almost being able to fall apart and to break in a few parts, but we're gonna reshape that. So it seems to be really like that kit gonna be it's a very basic kit, huh? Lots of work on that to do some correction, but hopefully I'll be able to get a pretty decent result. Interesting enough, okay, that's the last part, and I'm discovering this kit with you at the moment, so I don't have much exposure on this airplane. Fortunately, I bought 4 of those kits, so I'm gonna have to build them all. But anyway, so the undercarriage is in resin parts as well, and it's quite interesting because you can see that to get some stability and some strength, there is basically a metallic wire who goes through the whole undercarriage. So this will allow to avoid to have it bend. So we have the main landing gear, and I guess this one will be this one is in metal, white metal part, and the nose landing gear is gonna be also in metallic parts. So we have a few set of wheels, which is quite interesting. 4 main landing wheels, 5, and 4 nose wheel. Interesting enough. So this airplane will have also the cockpit, but no cockpit window. I mean, no clear part on this one, as you can see. So we're gonna use this one to make we're not going to build any details on the cockpit and use some decals later on. The tail cone, we're just going to have to do a little bit of a cutting and adjustment, but that should be working easily enough. And then the gear doors for the main landing gear and the nose gear are located here. So nothing too expensive, nothing to really get crazy about, but as we don't have many of those 717 outside, so we're gonna try this one on. So enough of talking, and let's start building.
So we're going to start this build by preparing the parts, and I have to say that preparing the parts and correcting the parts themselves will be a very long task in this build. So initially what I had to do, I had to prepare the cockpit window, who are filled in resin, and I had to remove the extra resin from the part and from the fuselage, and I had to do a lot of cutting and sewing. So the problem on that build, it's not for inexperienced modelers. It required a lot of work, but at the end we can get a pretty decent result. I didn't do a lot of cut on that video to show you how long you have to, how much you have to go, do some filling with some putty and coming back and sanding down until you get the proper shape, because it really required, this build required much more work than I usually had. Now on that particular aircraft, on that model, I had another issue, but you will see later on that when I decide to make my final decision to put the gear up or down. But the problem I had was on the wings. There was some misshape, and basically the wings were too thick along with the structure around the fuselage. So this requires a lot of work once again to trying to reshape and get the proper alignment and to be able to build a model. So now what I'm doing is I'm preparing the tail cone, and the tail cone of course has some also some preparation, and we're gonna prepare all the parts slowly until we're able to proceed on the build. So after preparing the fuselage, now we're gonna fill all the gaps on the cockpit and on the tail cone, and for this I will use some regular grey color Tamiya putty, and I will do the initial filling, and then of course we're gonna prepare, while the putty is drying, we're gonna prepare the tail. So I have also to prepare basically the horizontal stabilizer and get them ready, and then we will be able to move on and get it corrected. So now we're gonna assemble basically the horizontal and vertical stabilizer together, and for this we're gonna use super glue. I've been using super glue for the whole build, as the super glue is the only glue you can use basically on resin kits versus the regular plastic glue, which will not work basically on the resin. So after that, of course, we are going to fill up all the gaps, and while the putty is drying, we're going to try to prepare the wings and that main assembly. And once again, there is a lot of work on that part, as you probably cannot see from here, but the part is basically a couple of millimeters too thick, and it requires basically a lot of preparation on the fuselage, on the wings, and a lot of reshaping as well, as basically the wings are too thick. So, and there is nothing much you can do, but the only thing I was trying to do and able to do was to give it basically a decent shape. So but once again, it's a problem coming from the mold, and I received the kit like that. I had other 717 before from the same brand, and the kit were in perfect shape, and I didn't have the same issue. So maybe it's only related to these kits. I had a bunch of those. I ordered 3 or 4 recently, so this is the first one of that batch, and we will see later on if I have the same issue once again. So it requires again a lot of sanding, a lot of filling, and I've been using some files as well, because those are removing much more resin at the same time. It's a faster work. And then of course we're making some try, we see how it works, then I using the saw to make some marks on the model, and then trying again to reshape all over again. So now we're going to work on the fuselage. We're going to remove the extra putty on those on the window and the tail cone, and some part also of the fuselage itself. And I also had to fill up some of the gear doors. The part was the hole was too big, and so that was another things that I had to do. So before assembling the wings, I decided to finish the fuselage and to get everything ready to avoid further issue later on. As the first coat of putty was not good enough, I would say, and I couldn't fill all the gaps, so after it dried out, so basically I had to use, this time I've been changing colors because that gives me the pattern and I can see if there is still if the shape and the surface is still smooth, or if there is still some holes and some other gaps. So after that, of course, we have to sand it down once again, and this is the ongoing part of modeling. So now we're going to start working on the fin, and for this initially I've been using a metallic file, try to get basically the top at the correct shape, as it should be a flat surface, and I had some irregularity otherwise, so I had to do that. And then later on I will finish the work with some sandpaper, of course, and like the rest of the model I'll have to go and refill again later on, refill again with some white Tamiya putty, and trying to remove all those gaps slowly and but surely. As you can see now, I'm gonna fill up also the leading edge of that 717 because there was also some more modeling issues. So there were some gaps and some holes, so I had to make sure that everything was smooth. Then what I will do is I will make an initial fix, and then I will add the super glue, and using that capillarity system where basically the holes will suck out all the super glue and let it dry. Then of course I will trying to cover all those gaps with a fairly big amount of putty, and of course let it dry, and when it will be cured I'll be able to try to reshape it. But this part will take quite a lot of time. All over the model I had the same issue, so the putty was drying out, so removing the excess and then still finding some little gaps around. I have to change putty colors, and this way I'm able to see if there is still some little gaps. And as you can see, this is the third layers of putty that I'm applying on the fin. So now we're gonna try to remove the excess putty, mainly on the wing part initially, and then we will start to go along the fuselage and the wing roots. But of course this is just the first time, the first part, and then of course there will be a little bit more along that build. So let's prepare now our engines, and I have to do some small fix, as some parts were already cracked, and there is some extra resin as well on the intake, so I've been using some sandpaper and some scalpel knives to be able to get everything to the correct shape. Of course, now that our putty has dried out, it's time to remove the excess, and of course we're going to try to get the desired shape on that airplane. I also decided to fill as the gear door were a little bit too big and they were not at the correct shape, I decided to fill it up. I have to fill up the gear doors and the gear bay with some Tamiya putty. So now we will put the fin on the aircraft, and of course that will require a little bit of fiddling, and I will use some super glue. And I have to say that it took a little bit of extra time to get it basically at the proper diameter and to make sure that it would be able to stand. Then of course there were some major gaps, so that require a lot of putting and a lot of filling. So and I had to basically do the correct shape on the first triangle, basically on that junction between the fuselage and the tail fin. Of course, with the amount of putty, I had to use a big file to get the proper a good result, and then later on to the finish I will use some sandpaper. As the result were still what I wanted, I had to re-put a little bit extra white putty this time, and to make sure that I had a correct shape. And of course this will take so basically that model, and that particular model, is a lot of extra work, a lot of parts preparation, a lot of putty, sanding, and this is the main job. So as the shapes are not really accurate and a lot of things, so it's a challenging build, but you will see the final result soon enough. So we are on our final work on the tail now. So I'm removing just the extra putty, and then I will correct the rudder, basically, as there is some extra putty inside, basically between the junction of the rudder and the tail. So for this I've been using a rescribing tool, and then I will correct it once again, and then I will use a sharp knife to try to be able to remove the excess putty. Then we're gonna basically glue those engines and their mounts toward the fuselage, let it dry, and of course another big time filling all the gaps with some putty, and of course this will require some extra work. So at that stage the build is almost finished, but what I decided was basically to paint that Qantas red on the tail, as I normally have some issue with the Tamiya red color. It's normally the last layer I would put, but the problem is this time I decided to go first, as I had a universal color, and then I let it cure over a period of 10 days. So when I had to mask it, I didn't have any marks from the adhesive tape on the paint. So I've been using this on that model, and I have to say that it worked. So later on I decided to close all the gear door and to put the model airborne, as I don't have much space left in my vitrines. So that allowed me to add another layer of model on top of each others. So that's why I close all the gear doors and fill it up with mastic. So you will see the final result very soon. But of course there were still some very small gaps, and as that red color was drying, I was able to finish closing all the doors and do a little last touch-up. Then it's now time for the final coloring. So I use initially for a Tamiya gold color for that gold band on top of the red, and then I use a light gray color to basically to cover the horizontal stabilizer and the engine tail and also the wings. After that, what we are going to do, we're also going to add an extra gray color, as we're going to put a clear, basically a white coat on the fuselage, and it will be easier for the white to adhere to the surface if instead of red color. Now we're going to paint the engines, and for this I use the Corrugator that I normally use, the same color. It's a mix of gray color and metallic color together, and that gives that finish for the engines. After that, the leading edge will be painted in metallic colors, and I will do so the engine lips, the leading edge, and now we are going to do the final coat, the final white coat all over the aircraft. So for this it's cover the tail, of course, and the engines and the whole fuselage itself. Last phase of the build, we're now using and putting all the decal on the aircraft. So I'm starting with the kangaroo from Qantas Airlink, and I have to say that I really like this color. And then of course I use this time some Australian decal production, and I have to say that I was very happy with them. They were pretty easy to use, a little bit basic for the window and the cockpit window shape, but the rest, the logo and everything is really beautiful. Last part, we are now putting the aircraft on its mount and let the super glue dry, and then here is the final result of that 717 from Qantas Link. So I hope you enjoyed that build with me. I have to say that it was really a challenging build, but overall it was also very enjoyable. So I hope you liked the video. If you did so, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done it yet, and I will see you soon for another build video. Thank you for watching.